Welcome to the Third Eye Show, which brings you ancient wisdom as well as cutting-edge investigations into the mysteries of the universe. The Third Eye Show celebrates our diversity, like the unique beauty of each individual wave, and our oneness, like the magnificent ocean from which each wave emerges. We are all one in spirit as we live on this earth plane. The third eye is said to be able to see into the spiritual and psychic realms. At a time when our lives, our country, and our planet are undergoing intense transformations, we will explore topics that will fascinate, enlighten, and empower. Join us as we witness the thrilling ways spirit manifests in our daily lives and the varied paths we choose to create heaven here on our earth. The Third Eye Show is created and offered in love and light.
Today's Third Eye Show takes you to the outer reaches of the universe. First, we ask a question that has baffled humanity for millennia. Are we alone in the universe? And we look at the scientific quest for life in the cosmos. Next, we have the pleasure of presenting an essay by celebrity physicist Brian Greene, in which he reflects that science nourishes the mind and the soul. And finally, from Australia, in an interview with Diane and Robert Frola, the founders of the Australian UFO Research Network, we explore the fascinating work being conducted down under to scientifically investigate UFO phenomena with an open mind in a professional manner. What do you believe? Let's talk about it on today's Third Eye Show. The Third Eye Show is beginning its 5th season on the air right now. Isn't it amazing how quickly the time passes? We want to welcome our viewers all around the world. We were, I'll admit, a little surprised and very delighted when we were able to finally get statistics. We've been waiting for the technology to allow us to actually get some statistics about who in the world and where in the world our show is being watched. And we were frankly delighted to find that people in over 75 countries in this world and on every continent except Antarctica are watching this show. You're watching in South America, Asia, the Middle East, Africa, as well as Europe. You're watching in Iran, you're watching in Afghanistan, you're watching in Malaysia, you're watching in Lesotho, you're watching in Peru, as well as, of course, the United States, Canada, Europe, Mexico, Australia. You're watching all over the world. People in Norway, people in Romania. We were really delighted, and we want you to know that we welcome you. And we want to hear from you. We want to know what you're interested in, what you're thinking, what you would like for us to talk about, what you'd like for us to explore for you. Write to us. Just drop us a line. As we start our 5th season on the air, worldwide, via the internet and public access TV here in America, we decided to update the very first segment that we ever aired. We called it, Are We Alone in the Universe? And it's something that has been of great interest to me personally my entire life. And that's why it was the very first segment of the very first show. We decided to update it because science has advanced tremendously in the last 5 years. And, for example, whereas 5 years ago we only knew about a handful of planets outside of our solar system, we now know about more than 300. So there have been amazing advances. We decided that it was time to update this piece for those scientific reasons, but also because my personal attitudes toward the subject have evolved in the last few years. And I wanted to share some of those thoughts with you, and always invite your thoughts and comments. Have you ever looked up into the night sky and looked at those stars that are twinkling out there and wondered if somebody out there somewhere was looking out into their own night sky, looking out at the earth perhaps, and wondering, who's out there? Is anybody out there? Are we alone? Do I have cosmic cousins somewhere? I know I have, and I think you probably have too. I think that's probably pretty common to the human experience. Have you ever wondered if those cosmic cousins could possibly traverse the vast distances of the universe and travel here and visit us? Have you ever wondered if maybe they actually have? I think we've all wondered that. And if we do meet our cosmic cousins, could it actually happen in our lifetime? These questions are as old as humanity. Although I think, with the rising consciousness in 2012 coming nearer, that we may find the answers to these questions a lot sooner than we thought we would. I think we may actually be coming to the point where we're ready to meet them, or they're ready to reveal themselves to us openly. You know, I personally have seen tapestries, ancient tapestries, medieval tapestries, hundreds of years old, in which there are what look for all the world like UFOs in the background. They're also in cave paintings. They're in Renaissance paintings. They're everywhere. People have been recording sightings of UFOs since time began. I think this is really happening. I think they are here. Probably several different cosmic cousins are here and are waiting for us to evolve sufficiently to be able to acknowledge them. For decades, the SETI program has been listening to the cosmos, listening to radio waves, hoping to get a signal from outer space. The SETI Institute comprises 3 centers. There's the Center for SETI Research, the Carl Sagan Center for the Study of Life in the Universe, and the Center for Education and Public Outreach. Today, Frank Drake is the director for the Carl Sagan Center, and Jill Tarter is the director of the Center for SETI Research. SETI at Home is a scientific experiment that uses internet-connected computers in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. You can participate in this grand adventure by running a free program that downloads and analyzes radio telescope data. So if you're interested, visit setiathome.berkeley.edu and find out how you can get involved. I think this is a fantastic opportunity for anyone who's excited by the possibility of life in the universe and would actually like to participate in the search. Frank Drake is also celebrated for the famous Drake's equation, in which he imagined the factors that might give us the number of civilizations in our galaxy alone that might be capable of communicating with us here on Earth. It consists of a series of fascinating questions about the possibility of extraterrestrial life. Questions as simple as, what is the number of stars in the galaxy, which, as we know, may be as high as 300 billion with a B, to questions such as, how many planets are there? And as I said at the beginning of this discussion, we know now that there are at least 330 because we've categorized them, and there probably are untold billions of them. Some people believe that there may actually be solar systems circling every star in every galaxy in the universe. And also, he wondered about things such as, well, how many civilizations survived long enough to be able to reach out to other civilizations? And that's something, of course, we can't know. We can't know how many planets there may be harboring intelligent life, intelligent civilizations that are spacefaring and reaching out. So it's theoretical, but they're fascinating questions. And if you're interested, it's very easy to find Drake's equation and look at that series of questions and think that out. You know, when we talk about life as we know it, we're really limiting ourselves. We have to broaden our concept of life to even begin to comprehend extraterrestrial life. Because even right here on Earth, life exists under conditions that preclude life as we know it, under conditions in which human beings could never exist. For example, the vent shrimp, the Dumbo octopus, and the zoarcid fish all thrive 1.5 miles below the sea's surface, near a hydrothermal fissure in the ocean's floor, where temperatures are greater than 600 degrees Fahrenheit. And the weight of the water can be 1,100 times that of the pressure at the water's surface. So think about that. We couldn't possibly exist under those conditions, and yet these animals are thriving right here on Earth. That's not life as we know it. When we think of life as we know it, we think about people walking around breathing cats, dogs. We don't think about these beings that can live right here in our backyards, 600 degrees of temperature, under 1,100 times the pressure that we experience at the water's surface. And then there are wood frogs, right here in our own backyards, literally in our own backyards, here in the northeastern part of America. They freeze solid in the winter. They freeze solid in the winter. In their bodies, there is a natural antifreeze that keeps their cells from freezing. And then they thaw out in the summer. Now, you and I wouldn't do too well if we froze solid in the winter, would we? That's certainly not life as we know it. If you came upon a person who was frozen solid, that person would not be alive. And yet wood frogs freeze solid routinely, right in our backyards, thaw out in the spring, and they're good to go. That's not life as we know it, and that's in our backyards. So we really have to seriously open our minds to the concept of life and what might constitute intelligent life before we can undertake this search, I believe, in any serious manner. So there's an enormous amount of diversity that exists right here on Earth. Given that, imagine what exists in the universe and how broad an understanding we must apply to this search. Well, you know I'm a Trekker, a lifelong Star Trek fan, and the Vulcans have a concept that they call IDIC. IDIC is IDIC. It stands for infinite diversity in infinite combinations. And I think that that's the type of thinking we need to apply to this search and to the whole concept of life in the universe in order to even begin to understand what may be out there and what I think is out there. Now, according to mathematician and nuclear physicist Enrico Fermi, we should have been visited long ago. So he said, Fermi's paradox says, So where is everybody? If there are aliens that are coming here, if there are all these different beings out in the universe, where are they? Why don't we know about them? And the fact that we don't know about them, that they're not walking around next door and downtown on Main Street, does that mean that they don't exist? Well, he thought that it does mean they don't exist. He said, where is everybody? And he was a pretty smart guy, so we can't just throw that out and say that's ridiculous. It's worth considering. Where is everybody? Well, what do you think? Do you think Fermi was right? Or do you think he was missing something? I think he was missing something that's right under his nose. Because I do believe that they're here and we're just not paying attention. There's so much evidence, and we're not paying attention to it. Betty and Barney Hill, a middle-aged married couple, were driving home to Exeter, New Hampshire from a short trip to Canada. This is in 1961. They were driving along U.S. Route 3 in central New Hampshire when Barney saw what he thought was a bright star. And it looked like it was moving around erratically, so he stopped the car and he got out of the car. He put his binoculars up and focused on the subject, and to his amazement, he saw that what he had thought was a star was actually a spaceship. And he could see windows. Beyond the windows, he could see beings moving around inside the ship. He was terrified. Jumped in the car, floored the gas, ripped on out of there. However, he didn't get very far when the car just stopped. And he and his wife Betty were taken up into the ship, where they were examined, where there was a conversation, where all sorts of things happened. Ultimately, they were returned to their car with the suggestion that they forget all about it and just go on home. And they did. They did go on home, and they did forget about it until they started having a series of nightmares. And in these nightmares, they remembered this experience. And what was interesting was that they had the same nightmares. They were having the same nightmares. So they ultimately went to Boston. They went down to Boston to consult with a Dr. Simon, who was a psychiatrist, Bernie Simon, because they needed some help with this. They were having these nightmares, they were feeling very ill at ease, and they felt they needed the help of a professional. So Dr. Bernie Simon put them under hypnosis individually and was amazed to find that they were telling the same story under hypnosis. They were both telling the same story. Their stories tallied exactly. And he came to believe that this actually was a real incident, that this really did happen. Stanton T. Friedman is a nuclear physicist who's very well known in the field of ufology. Looked at the whole Betty and Barney Hill case and came to believe that they were quite sane people who actually had had an experience, who had the experience that they recounted. So something's going on. Something happened to those people. I personally don't believe every story that comes down the pike any more than I believe that everything that people see in the sky is a UFO is an interplanetary or intergalactic spaceship. Some of them are weather artifacts, some of them are weather balloons, some of them are hoaxes. But some of these things are real, I believe. Some of the experiences people are recounting are real. Everybody's heard about Edgar Mitchell, the United States astronaut, who's been saying for decades, he's been saying all along, that astronauts know about this, airline pilots know about it, everybody knows about it, the government knows all about it, and they're just not talking about it. As I've said before, I'm a lifelong trekker. I love the concept of intelligent life in the universe. I know that there's a galactic federation out there, a brotherhood of light that's just waiting for us to step up and join them. I believe in Gene Roddenberry's vision of cooperation and scientific inquiry among all peoples, all races, from the blue and tentacled Andorians to the pig-faced Tellarites, all working together in harmony for the betterment of everybody. I see in the face of Roddenberry's beloved Mr. Spock character everything I love about Star Trek. Intelligence, curiosity, integrity, and a wonderful alienness. And to me, it makes for unbeatable fantasy. Somewhere in my heart of hearts, I believe there really is a Mr. Spock. And that he's somewhere out in his stellar cartography lab, looking out over the Alpha Quadrant, right now perhaps, homing in on that little blue planet we call Earth and cocking his eyebrow and saying, fascinating. And I think that sooner or later we're bound to meet our cosmic cousins out in the open, and that when we do, we're going to step up and take our place in the celestial community. What do you think? This essay is copyrighted material and is used with the permission of This I Believe Incorporated. To read and hear other essays and to submit your own, visit www.thisibelieve.org.
One day when I was about 11, walking back to Public School 87 in Manhattan after our class visit to the Hayden Planetarium, I became overwhelmed by a feeling I'd never had before. I was gripped by a hollow, pit-in-the-stomach sense that my life might not matter. I'd learned that our world is a rocky planet, orbiting one star among the 100 billion others in our galaxy, which is but one of hundreds of billions of galaxies scattered throughout the universe. Science had made me feel small. In the years since, my view of science and the role it can play in society and the world has changed dramatically. While we are small, my decades of immersion in science convince me this is cause for celebration. From our lonely corner of the cosmos, we have used ingenuity and determination to touch the very limits of outer and inner space. We have figured out fundamental laws of physics, laws that govern how stars shine and light travels, laws that dictate how time elapses and space expands, laws that allow us to peer back to the briefest moment after the universe began. None of these scientific achievements have told us why we're here or given us the answer to life's meaning, questions science may never address. But just as our experience playing baseball is enormously richer if we know the rules of the game, the better we understand the universe's rules, the laws of physics, the more deeply we can appreciate our lives within it. I believe this because I've seen it. I've seen children's eyes light up when I tell them about black holes and the Big Bang. I've received letters from young soldiers in Iraq telling me how reading popular accounts of relativity and quantum physics has provided them hope that there is something larger, something universal that binds us together. Which is why I am distressed when I meet students who approach science and math with drudgery. I know it doesn't have to be that way. But when science is presented as a collection of facts that need to be memorized, when math is taught as a series of abstract calculations without revealing its power to unravel the mysteries of the universe, it can all seem pointless and boring. Even more troubling, I've encountered students who have been told they don't have the capacity to grasp math and science. These are lost opportunities. I believe we owe our young an education that captures the exhilarating drama of science. I believe the process of going from confusion to understanding is a precious, even emotional experience that can be the foundation of self-confidence. I believe that through its rational evaluation of truth and indifference to personal belief, science transcends religious and political divisions and so does bind us into a greater, more resilient whole. I believe that the wonder of discovery can lift the spirit like Brahms' Third Symphony. I believe that the breathtaking ideas of science can nourish not only the mind, but also the soul.
The Australian UFO Research Network turns 10 years this year. So November 28th, we're actually 10 years.
Our motto really is sharing is caring. So the whole idea is to get that information out to other UFO organisations and to the public.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way we're going to get to the bottom of it. Because if we don't share the information with other personalities within this field, then we're sort of kind of stuck with, this is my information, I'm not going to mention any vital statistics about it to you, and that person may have something that may be relevant to this, to a particular case, and he won't share it because everyone's interested in getting their name up as the one who solves it all. So,
when really everybody has a piece of the puzzle, but sometimes they don't know what part of the puzzle they have until we actually start looking at other people's research and saying, well, that could be possible because this has happened and this happened in another case. So, yeah, sharing is caring, and sometimes people have an issue with that.
oh, believe me, the politics involved with UFO research is just as bad as the car clubs, stamp clubs, you name it, it's the same. You have to deal with it, and it's very difficult at times.
You mean the egos?
The egos,
Oh, yeah.
and,
Yeah. So what kinds of things are people seeing? I mean, what's happening out there in the sky? And I would think here with these clear skies, beautiful clear skies you have in Australia, I bet there are a lot of sightings.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
definitely.
get heaps. The hotline can have up to 20 phone calls a week. And that's a lot of work from around Australia, national. Sort of every state in Australia, we have the telephone numbers available. And we're having people reporting, like policemen, reporting triangle craft, which is just over the hill over here, which you've got a view of, from the Gold Coast. I mean, he went outside and he saw this huge triangle just hovering over his house, and the only reason he looked up was his dog started to growl, and the dog was looking up, and he looked up and he said, and he fell on my backside, he said, when I saw it. He said, I know what I saw. And he said, and it's not from here. Because if it is from here, we shouldn't be using any of the fossil fuels that we're using, any of them. Yeah.
But, I mean, they're the exceptions because they're sort of coming back into reality, if you want to use those words, because back in the 70s and 80s, there were a lot of reports of boomerang-shaped objects, triangular-shaped objects, saucer-shaped objects, and then for a long period of time, a couple of decades, all we were getting were orange balls of light.
Yeah,
or
there's
white
just so
balls
many
of light.
orange balls of light.
And really, from a research point of view, there's not much to it. You can't really say it's an aircraft, you can't really say it's not, because the information related to that sighting, or sightings, is very minimal. I saw a light, it was orange, it went from horizon to horizon, and that's essentially the gist of it. So there's not much you can do about those particular types of sightings. All you do is just record it and you put it on a database. But information-wise, they don't really have much value. Now, with the new X-File movie that's come out,
Which has nothing to do with aliens.
which has absolutely nothing to do with aliens.
But it generated the interest again, which was good.
We're all getting something like 20, 30 phone calls a day for a period of a couple of weeks. It was just very hard to keep on top of it, especially when you got volunteers. I mean, they can only do it after hours, and sometimes the people that we're trying to contact are not available after hours. So.
Are there hot spots here in Australia where things are seen more often than in other places?
Yes and no. Yes, I suppose, like Tully, but it was just like really concentrated for a very short period of time, say a couple of weeks, maybe a month. But other than that, then it would just disappear. Like sightings will literally disappear for long periods of time before they reoccur. And it's not like a hotspot where you will always see them.
Like
But-
Whitecliff Well, you mean?
Yeah,
In the centre of Australia. Known hotspot, Whitecliff Well in the centre of Australia. Yeah. It's sightings all the time, but then again, there could be things that people actually can identify, but they're not
Yeah.
familiar with. They haven't seen these things flying through the sky before, because when you're near a city, you've got light pollution. When you're out in the country, you've got beautiful clear skies, and you see things you wouldn't normally see. So a lot of these sightings can be identified, as normal everyday things like satellites, meteorites, that you wouldn't see if you're in the city. But Whitecliff Well is known as a hotspot because it gets quite a large variety of different kinds of sightings. Like typical thing is like they say, we just saw a spaceship. It landed down on the road and this being got out of it. So these are the type that are really interesting. Yeah. And they do get reported, and there's a newspaper up there called The Advocate that loves the UFO sightings, because I think the sales just multiply when they put a sighting in the newspaper. So we do get to hear quite a bit about that area being a hotspot. But then again, it's a frequency of sightings that get reported in those spots that make them sort of like stand out.
Yeah.
You could get sightings throughout Australia that only occasionally get a minimum scatter of UFO sightings. But in that week they may have 5 or 6, but that to us doesn't make that a hotspot.
Yeah.
Hotspots are a reoccurrence
on a regular
basis every
Over time.
over time.
over a period
yeah.
of time. Yeah. You're probably familiar with the term UFO flaps. I think it was something that was coined by a United States researcher. Name escapes me at present, but a UFO flap essentially is a large concentration of sightings in one particular area, whether it's a city or county or town, or a state. And it may last anywhere from a few days up to a few weeks, if not a month. And then it will just peter out, and you may not get any more activity, or at least intense activity, for many, many years.
Yeah.
All right. We get that from time to time here in Australia. Tully is one, Whitecliff Well is another.
The Grampians in Victoria.
Grampians,
Yeah.
Grampian
Grampian
Mountains in Victoria.
Down in the south of the country.
Yeah, the
South
Blue
of the-
Mountains.
Blue
Blue
Mountains. But with the Blue Mountains, it's like a constant. It's not like high density. It's just a constant supply of sightings over a period of time.
My personal thoughts on that is the Blue Mountain attracts the more like-minded people. A lot of like-minded people live in the Blue Mountains, which makes them a little bit more observant. They'll be out at night and looking at the beautiful blue sky, sky with all the stars and that. They're very open to this kind of phenomena. So it's like Millennium, which is up in the top of Brisbane here. You get a group of people that love the country, love the lifestyle, the very alternate people. So they're very spiritual, very open. And these people tend to see more than your average city folk.
They go outside and they look up in the sky.
Yeah.
Right? They're like nature walks. I mean, they're alternative in the sense that it's not like a person, like a businessman, 9 to 5. He works in the city, comes home, he goes in his house.
Then he
And-
pops outside to have a cigarette.
Right.
Looks up, oh, what's that?
Hey.
Bang, he's satisfied.
Most people stay in their homes. They don't go out. They don't go for walks at night. I mean, it's amazing how many people just remain indoors. And the alternative-minded people are more outdoors.
Yeah, they enjoy the outside environment. They like to get, as they would say, one with nature. So, I mean, getting to be one with nature would be not just daytime, it's nighttime too. So,
Yeah.
which makes them a little bit more susceptible to
Seeing things.
seeing things,
Yeah.
feeling things. Yeah.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, we started getting some old reports, which are just as interesting as the new reports that we're getting. And some of the old reports were actually one was of a stockman, and he used to drive the cattle on this track that cuts across Australia. He used to sort of take the cattle and they'd feed along this track. And he had Aboriginal trackers and stockmen as well. And one night he was sitting looking at the stars, dinner was ready. They're out in the middle of the nowhere, in the centre of Australia. And then the Aborigine said to him, "You want to see one of them spacemen?" And he said, and lo and behold, he said, this thing came down from the sky. He said it had portholes. It was massive. It was over, like a torpedo shape. And the Aboriginal man's just sitting there. He goes, "Yeah," he says, "they've been coming here for a long time." He says, "Them pictures on the rock," he said, "we didn't do them. Ancestors did them."
We had one Aboriginal elder say...
You're going to have an amazing time at the cultural place when you go.
Yeah, when we did our UFO trek back in 1999, we flew over an area where there was these huge concentric circles. And, we were something like 8,000 feet up, and these things were huge. It's almost like the Nazca plane lines. Similar, but these were all concentric circles. They look like the ancient Aboriginal art. And
we actually did a negative of one of the circles, and one of our friends said, "I've got a picture of a painting that's actually on the rock, Ayers Rock, which is Uluru now. To be respectful, we have to call it Uluru." And she brought out the picture of the painting, and we did a sort of like a negative of the picture that we had taken, and it actually fits right on top of the painting on the rock. And it's supposed to be 60,000 years old, that painting?
No, the Aborigines said, they're the old ones.
They call them the old ones.
The old ones. Because Aborigines really don't have any sense of time. They don't judge things like we do.
If tomorrow comes, tomorrow will be here.
Today
is today, tomorrow we'll worry then.
You never tell an Aborigine, "I'll see you at 2 o'clock," because he has absolutely no concept of what 2 o'clock is. You may see him roughly that time, you may not. You may not see him for 3 or 4 days before he turns up. It's just
the
their
way
psyche.
they are.
That's the way they are. So when they say the old ones, it could be hundreds, if not thousands, hundreds upon hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago. It could be fairly, a long time back. As they say, the ancient dream time.
Yeah. See, the Dreamtime stories are very fantastic stories of, chariots, they wouldn't use the word chariot because they wouldn't even know, but the balls of light coming down and like serpents, the serpent snakes, this light spinning around and then coming and taking the women, and then the woman comes back and she's pregnant, and then the women disappear, and so does she comes back and the baby's gone. They do have a lot of these things happening out. There's a lot of parallels with what's happening with people. Yeah.
Now you've talked about different types of sightings, triangles and boomerang-shaped objects and lights. Do you think these are craft from different places, or what do you think this indicates? These different types of craft.
Well, they could be all from one place, but then again, they could be from various destinations, from out in space. Who knows? It's all, we're sort of getting into dealing with speculation, really, and one's own feelings about it and opinions about it. But if you follow the research of, say, Stanton Freeman as an example, and his involvement with a well-known US case called Benny and Barney Hill that occurred in New Hampshire.
Happened right in New Hampshire, where the Third Eye Show comes from.
All right.
Yeah.
I feel that Betty's testimony is the best we have in terms of proving that extraterrestrials do come from at least one particular location, Zeta 1, Zeta 2 reticuli, which, as we all know, in layman's terms, harbour the highest concentration of sun-type stars in our vicinity of the universe. So if there were going to be planets sustaining life, they're more likely to occur in those areas than in, say, a red giant or a white dwarf, those type of stars.
Makes sense.
And I mean, that's proof for me. I mean, she had nothing to gain from it. She got ridiculed for it. I mean, she lost her husband. Due to sickness and all that type of stuff. And I would imagine that's related to those experiences. So, why put yourself through all that if you weren't going to financially try to make something out of it?
For our viewers who are not familiar with the story, isn't it true that when Betty and Barney were abducted into the spacecraft, that Betty was shown a star map in which a certain star cluster was shown to her, and at the time when she recovered the memory through hypnosis, she told the authorities about it, and they said, no, that doesn't exist, there is no star there, and later they found, isn't there something like that?
Yeah, that's right.
Now Betty, she was given that map of the star map to actually relay back, well, this is where we come from, but you wouldn't see it because unless you have the technology to look back at Earth, which she was in a craft looking back at Earth.
That was a very clever astronomer to think of it from that perspective, because a lot of them would go, but there is no group of stars that look remotely like that. And yet this astronomer said, hey, wait a minute, you have to look at it from the perspective of the person where they come from, because that's how it looks to them, looking back at us. But in relation to Betty, she also mentioned a lot of medical procedures which at the time were either not well kept secrets but kept within the medical community and wasn't widely known at all.
Or used.
Yeah, like the device that we used to check to see whether she was pregnant or not. Yeah, she doesn't read medical journals, and I don't think medical journals would have been made available to the general public at that time. So just that aspect of it lends a lot of credence and proof that her experience is in fact real, quantifiable.
She was relaying information she couldn't possibly have known.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. It was sort of beyond her knowledge or understanding.
See, this is where we have to take into account these witness testimony. There are a lot of people out there that claim to have alien abductions and encounters, and we're in AFON. We really do need to turn over the stone, not leave any stone unturned when it comes to questioning. And sometimes that can be a little bit grueling for a person that's had an experience because they're actually looking for you to validate it in a story-only sense. You can't do that anymore. If you're really looking for the facts and the evidence, DNA testing of evidence, photographs of the actual markings, asking the hard questions. We don't ask the hard questions to disbelieve you. We actually ask you the questions to help you validate what you're saying is happening to you.
If we want to get more mainstream scientists involved in helping us with this, then you have to remain very black and white.
We have to supply them with the evidence that they need and they understand to be able to, in their learning circles, to be able to relate to what we're actually doing. Now, if we go off with, validating every story by just being a story without any evidence, then we're doing an injustice to the field, because everyone says you've got to have the physical evidence to prove what you're saying. It's like the star system, Betty's star system. No, it wasn't there, but today it's there.
Yeah, that's something that you can scientifically back up.
Yeah.
And you can't explain it away as imagination or influenced by science fiction novelists or what was current at the time on TV.
Yeah. So, yeah, we do ask the hard questions, and if anyone's actually having any experiences, I suggest that you actually treat yourself as I hate to say the word, a victim. Collect as much evidence as you can, because if you're working with a researcher, you want to work with somebody who's going to help you validate that experience that you're having. And the more evidence you can collect for that person, for your researcher, the easier it'll be for you.
Yeah.
And the easier it'll be for us to present to the scientists.
There's a gentleman who's photographed these orange plasma type UFOs. That intrigues me. And I've seen some footage. I think it's video footage of it.
You've seen your own.
And
We saw one.
Oh,
A close call.
here in Australia.
Yeah.
And
And that sort of changed our opinion of those ones.
I guess it would.
yeah,
It's like seeing is believing,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
So,
exactly.
I view myself as a skeptical believer. I'll believe in it, but when it comes to the investigation side of things, that belief gets pushed aside, and I hit it with,
The
is
hammer.
it an with a hammer? And I'm not subtle, because you have to be a straight shooter in this, or else people turn around and say that you're flaring things up.
Just a bunch of crazy kooks. And
That's it. That
Yeah.
there goes an object in the sky, or someone takes a photograph, and all of a sudden there's an object in there. It's obvious that the object is close to the camera itself because it's out of focus, which suggests that it's either dust particles or
Bird
an
flying
insect or something of that nature. And yet you've got this huge movement that's out there saying these objects that people don't see are UFOs. You try explaining that to them. Try to logically explain what these objects are. And they get angry at you.
To believe. They want to believe.
Because you're challenging
I mean, I
their
do too.
preconception.
Yeah.
They will not open up their eyes and go, okay, I didn't really think about that. Let's look at it from that perspective.
So, is that a problem sometimes when you're talking to somebody who thinks they witnessed something and you're being
It's not a problem.
objectively
Not for me.
skeptical? They don't,
Well, personally, it's not a problem for us.
well, I mean for them, do they
But
get resistant?
it's up to them whether they accept our findings. I mean, there are times where we have to say, look, I'm sorry, but what you've seen is an aircraft. Here are the reasons why. At this particular time, it flew past you. At this particular time, it landed at this particular airport. The reason why, when you went to the airport, you didn't see it was because the aircraft was towed into a hangar. Bang. I mean, it's all quantifiable proof, right? It's not like you're making things up or anything of that nature. But when people turn around and say, well, I don't believe you, it's a UFO, there's not much you can do about it.
See, people's perception of the word UFO. To us, UFO means an unidentified flying object. To a lot of people out there, they think of little green men, spaceships. As soon as you mention the word UFO, it conjures up all different feelings and belief systems in people. So people's different beliefs in the word can be, it can be a reason for how they react and what they perceive they're looking at.
Yeah.
Even their education. So, I mean, it's just you have to go back to being on the balance where the word means unidentified flying object. So you've got to set back on that plane, and that's what a good researcher will do. You'll go back to the plane, that level ground, look at what the word is, and then listen to what the person's actually telling you, what they've seen. It's hard. It is hard being a researcher these days, and it is really hard with the digital era, with the digital cameras, the pixels. I mean, a pixel is a small square, which makes up, I think, was it 118 million little squares you'll have in a picture to make up a frame. And when you're actually given a picture that's got a tiny white blob and someone's telling you that's
A flying saucer.
a flying saucer, it's really, really hard to sort of...
And like I said earlier on, it goes back to
Yeah.
these lights in the sky.
Yeah.
And when someone supplies you with an image of a little blob, I mean a small little blob,
That's
and
what
then,
it is.
and then they expect you to say, yes, it's a flying saucer, it's an object from outer space, there's not much you can do with it.
Then we get the ones that is really good photos, really great picture, like the Madison Beach down in South Australia. So clear picture. The picture's so clear. It's too clear to be real, and that gets ridiculed. So you kind of like, you know,
Stuck
you've
between
been
a rock and
a hard place. You sort of. But when something's like witness testimony is what you have to go off as well, because when somebody's actually reporting a sighting to you, they then relay what this object was doing. Now, if it was going from left to right, up and down, and you know, it moved from across the sky and then it came back again, and I mean, then we start looking at these and saying, well, that can't be something that we have, like a normal aircraft, because aircraft wouldn't be able to traverse the sky in such a short amount, you know, in that distance, in that short amount of time. Not that we're aware of yet, but there are things we're not aware of that are secret.
Yeah.
So we still have to keep that in our heads, that
See-
some of these things can be maybe some of our own.
But again, common sense has to come into it. For example, you may get some researchers saying that some of these UFOs are top secret military aircraft. Now, why would you test an absolute black operation military jet over suburbia? Common sense. I mean, common sense has to prevail.
I wanted to ask you about air safety.
Oh,
you
yeah.
mentioned on your website that you think that these craft could be a problem for air safety.
Yeah. It got to a point there was so many sightings of so many unusual craft and craft landing and scaring people. And I eventually said to Canberra, which I got through to the Defence Department that looks after all of the defence, and I said, well, the amount of sightings that we've had in the last 3 months, you should be really concerned for air safety. I said, because if those things are up there and you're not aware that these things are actually flying around, I said, you should be concerned for air traffic that's actually flying up there with them. And he asked me, he said, could you write us a letter and tell us, you know, what sightings were where and what dates they were on. And I sort of like kept in communication with the man at the Defence Department in Canberra and sent quite a few reports through. You know, here we are at UFO Research. They've got over-the-head radar systems, and what we've got, a telephone, a computer, and eyes in the sky out there. You know, they've got all the top-notch.
Well, I'm thinking that they
stuff.
very well may know about
Well,
these
that's
things.
what I was starting to think. I was thinking, now, how can they not know that
they
these
must.
are out there? Because there were so many, 10-year high for those 3 months. I mean, I checked on our data bank, and that's what I mean. You collect a sighting, and it might be just an orange ball of light, but when they all start to accumulate, and then you look at a graph, and you go, well, that's up here, and that's down there, and wow, that month was there, and wow, this is really topping the scale now, and it gets to be a worry. And because we're what I consider AUFON a responsible research network, I felt it was I was obligated to contact the Defence Department to say, this is happening, you should be worried.
Mind you, the Defence Department knows what's going on, because
Yeah.
they had a program very similar to the US,
That's it.
Operation Moondust, and we were in communication with
The United States,
the United
actively
States,
involved.
actively involved, and there was a special group within the Air Force that was their goal. If anything comes down, they have to retrieve it, contain it, and that stuff either goes to us or, as I suspect, will end up in the United States.
The main
somewhere.
concern, though, was that it was could have been secret technology. You know, if a satellite falls down and it belongs to another country, we want it. We've got to be there and get it.
But when they mention things like bodies, well, then we know that it goes beyond just the standard interpretation of what Operation Windust was about.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the Air Force knew. I mean, the Navy knew, and the civil aviation authorities, they knew about it because they all collected the data, and all this data is all in the archives down in Canberra.
So when Edgar Mitchell came out recently with these revelations that people have been telling him, pilots and Air Force personnel, that they've been seeing these things for years and years, and he finally came out with it, made it public knowledge, this wasn't news to you?
No.
Yeah, this is what you
No,
suspected.
he's been saying it for years, and this is what we've suspected.
I mean, we've had astronauts publicly saying that, there's more to it than meets the eye. We have seen things, we have photographed things, and NASA knows about it,
So if you have information, come forward with it.
Oh,
definitely. Don't hide it. Don't hide it.
Great. Thank you. Thank you both so much
You're
for
welcome.
being on the show.